Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids, and Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. Omari, my guy, I lost my voice a little this week as summer weights, football, and basketball workouts have started. My apologies to the listeners, but I gotta ask you, when and why was the last time you lost your voice?
That's been a long time, man. I would have to sit down and think about it. You are in a lot of opportunities to lose your voice because you have 3 kids, teach young kids, and when you have jobs that have kids or you have kids yourself, I feel like you're just in like a much higher risk category of losing your voice because you're screaming a lot more. So I don't know. I would have to think the last time I genuinely screamed, which
it had to be like at a Kendrick Lamar concert or something, right? Is Kendrick Lamar? Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, Kendrick, I went to a Freddie Gibbs show last week.
Who?
And Freddie. Oh, you don't know Freddie Gibbs. He's not. Yeah, he's not the most popular rapper, but he's good. I've screamed at some concerts for sure, just because it's so loud in there, but. Lost my voice. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. I'm surprised that this is the first time you lost your voice on this pod, just since you're always doing things that you could lose your voice for. So you've got some resistance there.
Yeah, I've slowly built it up, teaching the kids. And then I tell people, I feel like I have a pretty reserved personality. I think that's what people would say about me. But when I coach, believe it or not, I'm pretty intense. I get after it. I'm very competitive, even though I kind of have that more laid back, positive personality on the podcast. But we have a great guest today. And speaking of voices, he may have a little bit of a Boston accent that comes out from time to time. I hear it on his podcast with his host, Trevor Lane, on the Front Office Show, contributor at Spot Track and Celtics blog, NBA, cap, and free agency expert, Keith Smith. Keith, welcome to the Pistons Pulse.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. That's far too kind of an introduction.
I told you this in the email. I listened to the podcast, and it's funny. Whose name is it that you always kind of drop the Boston accent? It's happened in the last couple episodes.
It's no one particular.
Okay.
It's the R's, that we're known for back home, and it's when I get really animated and excited, that's when it comes back out. And anytime we're talking free agency and getting deep into cap stuff, I tend to get really excited. Maybe not a normal thing to get excited over, but that's my love. So I get super into that. And then next thing you know, I'm dropping R's and it sounds like I'm back home with my buddies.
Keith, we're going to go ahead and dive into some Pistons roster and cap questions here. I guess one, and I know a lot of people, for them, this is one of the key points of the offseason. How much cap space are we looking at as far as what they'll have to play with in free agency? Because I know Pistons fans have been reading all these rumors and reports and just sort of what's the outlook of their situation, especially now that we're past the lottery and we know what the value of that 5th pick will be.
Yeah, my latest projection for them is about $36 million in cap space. And when I do a projection too, the next and variable question is, well, does this include, this and this? And I go through, I project all the options, the qualifying offers, renouncements, all that. I do that for every team. And for the Pistons, I've got them at about $36 million in cap space. With their salary obligations, we can go into the details of how I get there if you guys really want to. But that's where I've got them at, is a little over 36 million.
Yeah, let's go into just a few of those because I know that does include them. What's the right term? I always mess this. Is that declining the option? How does that work? If it's a club option, what is the right, wording?
Yeah, no, you've got it declining the option, not exercising, but whatever synonyms we want to use there. But yeah, I've got them declining their team options on all of the team options that they have. Now, I wrote this in their offseason preview for Spot Track. I also did a piece where I went through my thought process on all those player and team options for the entire league. I don't think that necessarily rules out that all those guys are gone. But I do think they're going to maximize their cap space first. And then if they need to re-sign a couple of those guys, they'll do it out of cap space or the room exception or something like that. The guy I primarily think about there is Frank Jackson and also maybe Hamidou Diallo. The one option I do have getting picked up is Corey Joseph's player option, because I struggle to see him opting out of $5+ million when I don't know that he would recoup that on the open market this year. There's not a lot of cap space. There's not a ton of teams looking for veteran point guard, kind of can play a little bit of the two off ball kind of guy. I think he's happy in Detroit from everything I've ever heard and read. So I think, he'll be back there. And then probably the big one that does also include the draft pick, the fifth pick. That number went, I guess, unfortunately went up a little bit as they slid back in the draft, but that comes with a slightly lower cap hold on that first round pick. It unfortunately includes about $11.7 million in dead money, too, that they owe to Dwayne Dedman, DeAndre Jordan, and Zaire Smith. And then what it doesn't include, beyond those guys I talked about with the team options, is Marvin Bagley. Then I know we'll probably get into why it doesn't include him, but I've got the Pistons not only not offering him the qualifying offer, but also renouncing him. Then that's how they get to that big chunk of cap space.
So Keith, and I was actually going to dive into Marvin Bagley III next, and you mentioned his cap hold, which I believe is around $28.3 million.
Yep, $28.3 million. You're right on it.
So if the Pistons were to bring Marvin Bagley back, and I think there's some interest on their side to bring him back on a multi-year deal for the right price, of course, how do you navigate that and then also still have enough room in free agency to sort of address whatever needs you need, just given that his cap hold is so hold? And I would expect that unless there's a team that sees him as a near max guy, he's probably going to make a fraction of what that cap hold is.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at this. One is that $28 million. That means if they keep him on the books at that cap hold, then to be clear, this is a cap hold. This wouldn't be a salary. You can't sign for that or anything like that. But if they keep that $28 million, that's whether they give him the qualifying offer or not. That's what his cap hold would be. They cannot have cap space. There's no reasonable path to cap space, because once I know people might believe, well, you just said $36 million, they'd still have $8 million. But at that point, you would switch to using the non-taxpayer MLE and the biannual exception, and that would then push you back over the cap. So once you're under the combined value of that, you stay over the cap and keep those exceptions whole, because you'd rather have those than $8 million in cap space. But anyway, to the directions you can go with Bagley, I think the first part of this for him becomes, do you just straight renounce him and start with your, $36 million in cap space? Or do you hold that cap hold, at least initially? I'm sure there's been some conversations, have an idea of, or we're going to re-sign him right away for $7, $8, $9 million, whatever it is, in first year salary. And then you do that right out of the gates in free agency, which then his actual salary for next year replaces the cap hold. And then you could go the cap space route with what's left after that. There's one of two ways. So it's not a lock by any means that they're going to renounce him. I do it that way just because I think it's a simpler, easier picture to paint when the end result would be exactly the same either way. So yeah, I do think, everything I've heard, they'd love to have him back there. They thought he was good for them, and they'd like to see him back. But it's certainly not going to be at $28 million of a cap hold, nowhere even probably in the ballpark of that. So I think what that becomes then is, let's get him back, and whether it's we're going to renounce him and re-sign him, or we just July, or I guess June 30th now at 6 p.m., is it 6 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern, something, we get the tweet from Woj or Shams or whoever that says, Pistons and Marvin Bagley have agreed to a 3-year, $30 million deal or something like that. And then that gets you set up to then use whatever's left over in cap space from there.
So either take care of Marvin Bagley immediately or take care of him after you handle all your other business, basically.
Yeah, you can do it that way too. You just got to carve out, because I don't think he's coming back for for the $4 million, $5 million room exception. I don't think that's going to happen. So you need to have him. You need to at least have it lined up for the way you want to do it. And I will say that is something they've done really well with under Troy Weaver. There's been a lot of moving parts the last couple of years, and I think he's done really good of setting those moves up, because Anybody who follows me on Twitter is going to see me say this over and over and over again with the cap space. Sequencing the moves is really important because you have to get them in the right order. Otherwise, what you do is you run into what the Lakers did a couple years back, where you kind of blow it. Then it's like, oh shoot, we used cap space. We used an exception before we used cap space. Now that applies to the cap, and now that cap space is gone. Even though we're doing an exception, you got to order your moves correctly. But the Pistons have done well with that. And that's including with trading and then waiving and stretching guys and a lot of complicated parts. So they do a pretty good job managing their cap as far as order of operations goes.
So there's no way that you can sign Marvin Bagley III after that $36 million cap space is used up, right? Like, because if you renounce it, then the bird rights are gone. No matter what the order is, that contract is going to eat into the 36. So if Piston fans want to keep Marvin Bagley III, it's going to be out of that $36 million cap space you're projecting.
Yeah, unless they really pull a surprise and stay completely over the cap, which I would be kind of shocked if that's the direction they went. I just can't see that being it. You stay completely over the cap, then you do it in whatever order you want because you're going to retain rights and you do what you want with that. But yeah, if they go the cap space route, which is, I think, the most likely path, there is no way to do it unless he's only taking the room exception amount. And I think that's just too little for him. I think somebody would come with, at least a large chunk of the non-taxpayer MLE for him, if nothing else, to just try to, hey, we'll take a shot in the dark and see if we can make it work on with him too. So yeah, if he's gonna resign there for a big chunk of money, it's gonna have to come as through some of their cap space.
Long term, how does the flexibility look for this roster? Because I think whenever you have a team like the Pistons, where you have a lot of young guys, their 2020 class will be extension eligible next summer. Of course, you'll have to pay Cade one day. Things can get pretty expensive fast. When you look at this team long term, do you see them being able to retain some of the flexibility they have this season, or is this more of a situation where this roster is just going to get expensive fast and they may have some decisions to make in a couple of years?
They will get expensive, but I think that's still a couple years out for them. As you look, we used to in the NBA used to try to do things in 4 and 5 year time horizon windows. In now that's really changed to more 2-3 year windows, just because we're seeing a lot of these shortened contracts. There's also a new TV contract, new CBA coming as well. So that's going to throw a whole level of uncertainty into this. So you're really kind of planning. You're looking long term, but you're really kind of planning, where are we at in the immediate? What are we trying to do with that? And I think for the Pistons, the good news is after this year, their salary obligations are rookie guys on their rookie deals, and then they owe $3 million guaranteed to Kelly Olynyk of the last year of his contract. But his contract is, what I like to say, it's so fair. For what he is as a player, that they could just move off him, I think, without even having to eat that $3 million. But if you had to eat $3 million, that's not going to be the difference between it. You could always waive and stretch that $3 million to $1 million hit a year, which I know Pistons fans are well acquainted with the stretch provision from the Josh Smith years, and now we got Dwayne Dedman's going to be sitting on those books for.
Somebody just turned off the pod because he mentioned that.
Hey, that long national nightmare is over, right? Regional nightmare, maybe.
People were so scared they were going to stretch Blake Griffin too, and it was just going to keep going.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that. The stretch provision, it can bite you. There was, it's funny. There's still sitting on the Portland books as a couple of years for Andrew Nicholson, is still on the Blazers books from a long stretch.
Wow.
Yeah, Larry Sanders had a contract stretched over so far that it didn't even land on most cap sheets. You had to make a little note on the back end of it because it was so far off the future. But it's getting far afield. They're really set up well flexibility wise. Now, and by no means am I saying this is going to happen, but you can blow all that very quickly, right? In one summer, if you make a bad signing this summer, all of a sudden you've done quite a bit of damage to your flexibility, but they're well positioned. I think, in 23, 24, it's a whole bunch of rookie scale team options that they've got to deal with. In 24, 25, it'll be the last year of Cade Cunningham's rookie scale option. You'll have whoever they pick at 5 this year on the books, for the next couple of years too. At pretty low numbers, so they're set up pretty well. I think we're really looking. They'll start to really have to kind of go all in one way or another if they continue to improve in probably the 24-25 offseason will probably be their last big shot at major cap space for a while, assuming they've re-signed Sadiq Bey, they've re-signed Isaiah Stewart, and then Cade Cunningham will have probably a pretty healthy contract extension kicking in the next year after that. So that summer of 2024 is probably going to be the next or their last major shot, assuming things go well for them. But that's a couple years down the line, so they're doing okay now.
Okay, one more question here before we get to some of those big decisions they make this offseason with free agents that are available, and that's the Pistons' own Jeremy Grant, a very hot topic name. Again, I've heard you guys talk about him on your podcast. Is he going to be traded? Is he going to not? What kind of contract extension is Jeremy Grant looking at? What do you think his value is? And then a two-part question, Keith. Where do you think Jeremy Grant's value as a trade asset is? Did Troy Weaver miss the boat at the last trade deadline? Is it going to be the best this summer, or would it be better for him at the upcoming trade deadline? Maybe he stays long-term, but let's just talk about him as an asset. What's the contract, and where was his highest value?
Y'all are closer to it than I am, but everything I've read, when I start seeing somewhere between 4 years, 104 years, 120 million, over and over and over again, and it seems like the 4 years, 112 million, that 28 million per year seems to be kind of, I don't want to say locked in, but that's like we're seeing that so many places by so many different reporters. I tend to believe, all right, well, there's something there. He's looking for something in that range, so something in that range. Personally, that's a little rich for me, for what Jeremy Grant is as a player, because I think ideally he is your third best player maybe on a really good team and not necessarily your best player. And I like his game. I just think it's a little bit weird. So that extension, that's one of the ones where all of a sudden you could eat up a lot of your flexibility if you went to those kind of numbers. Now, the way the Pistons have structured basically everything else they've done, I don't think you're going to see them do that. I think if they do that, it's going to come with them protecting themselves on the back end somehow, right? Whether it's a team option, it's a non-guarantee, it's a non-guarantee with a team option, something like that. So they can really make sure, hey, we're okay here. We're going to be covered with this. Because I think what you want to do if you're the Pistons is just stay the course, right? We're building around our guys. If we get somebody like a Jeremy Grant, or maybe even Jeremy Grant, who wants to be here and be part of things, great. We'll take that opportunity. Did they miss the boat on trading him? I don't think so. I think you would have teams that would be, perfectly happy to still trade for him. What gets tricky, and this was coming no matter what, whether it was last year or it's this year, if he's insistent on I have to be extended, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge, right? Because then it's, all right, well, if I'm the Portland Trailblazers, do I want to commit, $25 to $30 million a year, for Jeremy Grant when we just kind of dug ourselves out of salary cap hell? Like we finally get out of this and we're willing to go right back in it for Jeremy Grant. But, what I always think is when you have a good productive player that real good teams would look at, I think, and say, yeah, he's somebody who can fit in with us. He's got a pretty tradable number. There's always a move to be made. And then you'll have a team that will say, we'll make the trade and then we'll figure out your contract stuff later. I'm not, we'll deal with it, because Jeremy Grant is not the profile of player, nor have I ever gotten the sense or anytime I've ever talked to him or reading or hearing anything else that he's the kind of guy who's like, well, then I'm holding out. I'm not going to show up. I'm going to pull a Simmons. I'm going to pull a James Harden and one out immediately. Like I've never gotten that sense. So I think I think they're fine if they want to trade him. I don't think his value has changed all that much, if at all.
That's music to most Pistons fans' ears that definitely want Jeremy Grant traded, which seems to be most of the fan base. But we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, we're going to get Keith Smith's thoughts on this free agency class and some of the bigger names that may interest Pistons fans.
I'm Alyssa Robinson for the Detroit Free Press. When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you do? Check your email? Me too. And when you sign up for our daily briefing newsletter, you'll get all the latest news sent directly to your inbox so you can wake up and be ready for the day. We also have newsletters about COVID-19 in Michigan, the latest entertainment headlines, as well as Woodward 248, a newsletter specifically for people living and working in Southeast Oakland County. And don't forget about automotive headlines and all the latest news from our Michigan sports teams. We have a newsletter for every personality and preference. Just head to freep.com/newsletters to sign up for any one of these great options and more.
We're back here with Keith Smith, cap and free agency expert. Keith, you kind of touched on it earlier, and just to expand on it a bit, just Pistons, you have a lot of cap space this summer. And for rebuilding teams, really for any team, but especially for teams who are looking to get out of the NBA basement, sort of a tricky position to be in. You mentioned Josh Biff. The Pistons were rumored to, I was like in college when this happened, so I don't have a lot of first-hand reporting on it personally, but Pistons were rumored to be highly interested in Andre Iguodala at the time, and they ended up with Josh Biff, and of course that didn't work out. And you kind of look at this free agency class, and it's not a great summer to have free agency. Just when you look at this, do the Pistons need to sort of walk a fine line here as far as finding ways to improve the roster, but also not being hankered down by contracts that could really bite you in a few years?
Yeah, well, what you can't do, you can't go out there and say, well, the best guy available is Mo Bamba, so I guess we got to give him $20 million. Like that's awful. Sit on your cap space. Do what the Thunder maybe we'll do. We'll see, and cut the guys a check at the end of the year before you put an albatross on your cap sheet. Don't do that. That's a awful decision that all too often teams make. Maybe this is a little bit of a roundabout way of answering your question. What gets missed, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, is cap space doesn't have to be used on signings. It can be used on trades. You can get involved on anybody. When you've got 30, let's call it 35 million in cap space, somewhere in that range, you can be involved on everybody. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, I'm not saying that they should have even remotely ever considered this, but if it was like, hey, we want to get involved in a Russell Westbrook trade somehow, you can, because you're basically there. You're talking cap space and Kelly Olynyk, and now we're there. We're where we need to be. And we really haven't given up anything other than our cap space. But I think if you're looking to go the free agent route, what this class lacks is star talent at the top. And I think that is going to start to become a little bit of the norm for at least the next 2 seasons or so. Because guys now, what they're doing is they're taking the extensions. They're locking in their money early, then saying, hey, lock it down. And then we all love this league, as silly as it can be. But one of the silliest things is, hey, you paid me, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in. I'm not real happy. I want traded, right? And that's the way this goes. And for me, that's a content machine, so I'm perfectly content to let it play out that way. But I think what you're seeing this specific summer is you've got a guy like Zach LaVine. He seems to be the main name out there that could actually be on the move, because James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, it seems like all those guys are locks to re-sign. But get past those stars, and what you have is a really pretty good deep group of role players. And where I think the Pistons could be successful if they don't use their cap space via trade is they've got a handful of roster spots open, especially if they go the cap space route. Go pick off a handful of those vets, similar to what they did with like a Mason Plumlee and a Kelly Olynyk. Get them signed to reasonable contracts, build out your depth around your guys, and then maybe next year you're the Cavs of next year, where you're taking that jump, and all of a sudden, hey, around the right guys, where we're right back in the playoff picture. Because I don't think they're all that far off. Now I'm a Celtics guy, so their success against Boston this year maybe colors my analysis there a little bit.
Super well.
Yeah, right. It was, it's funny. I was jokingly, I said to I said this on Boston radio because I don't know that it would play nationally, but I said, they're like, the Warriors are the toughest team the Celtics have faced. Yeah. And I was like, well, other than the Detroit Pistons, yeah, probably. But yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities for them to go get 2, 3, maybe even 4 guys using that cap space that could really help them this coming year. And what they can do too is, because when you're one of the only spenders, you can kind of, for a year, you could even overpay a guy. Let's say they really wanted. I'm just gonna pick a name out of the blue here. Let's say they really wanted Chris Boucher of the Toronto Raptors. He's probably a little young for this, but they could say, "Hey, we'll give you $15 million, but it's on a 1-year deal, or it's on a 2-year deal with a team option or a non-guarantee or something like that." And if you're Chris Boucher, you might be like, "I haven't made all that much. All right, I'll take that." For 1 year, and we'll figure it out down the line. And that's where I think the flexibility for the Pistons comes in. I don't think they're star hunting necessarily this offseason, but I think you have a chance to really round out your roster and build things up going forward. And that's important to me too, because I don't want to take minutes away from the kids. Like, I want them to be the ones we're growing around here if I'm running that show.
And you mentioned just the 1-year deal. I think it was 2016. You got a lot of teams lining up for Kevin Durant, and like the Knicks made a lot of cap clearing moves, and obviously did not get him, but they did sign a lot of 1-year deals, and that's just a way of just kind of rolling that flexibility forward more or less.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the one of the big ones on that was it was the year they were like, we're going to start to push forward. The Philadelphia 76ers signed JJ Redick to it was like a 1-year, like $15-16 million deal. And that was seen as like, wow, that's an overpay for Redick. It's really, really hard to overpay for 1 year for a guy. You can do it if you're a ready-made title contender and you give somebody who should get $2-3 million, maybe even a minimum, and you give them $5 million. That's not a great use of resources, and you can really kind of hurt yourself there. But as long as you are being really smart. I apologize if you guys can hear. We have a puppy, and he's not happy. He's locked up right now, so
it's all good.
He's letting us hear it.
Amari's street traffic is always getting in on the podcast, so
nice. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's an approach you have to consider as well. If you're not looking at land a big guy via trade or get something else, there's definitely options to improve this team in the immediate by kind of going out there picking off values. And if that means you overpay a guy for a year, whatever, it's not the end of the world. You just deal with it the next year.
All right, Keith, you said you don't necessarily think the Pistons should star hunt, but a lot of this fan base wants to star hunt. So I want to talk about 2 before we do talk about some of the names in the realm you're talking about. But the first one has to be DeAndre Ayton, a guy whose situation has I feel like it's flipped on its head, Keith. A month ago, if you said DeAndre Ayton was leaving Phoenix, you would get crushed on Twitter. And now it's like almost a guarantee he's going to leave. What is the situation there? Do you think he leaves Phoenix? And then I want to ask, what does a sign and trade look like? Because there's no way the Suns actually just let him walk, do they?
Yeah, I'll answer the last part first. No, they're not just going to let him walk. Even if things have gone completely sideways and they're both done, he's too valuable asset-wise for a team that is over the cap, approaching the tax, to just let him walk. So I think what happens is, even if the Suns we're done, go find your deal, whatever it is, it will be a sign and trade because they're going to want to recoup something of value for him as just strictly an asset play. I know people aren't always super high on DeAndre Ayton, but he's pretty good. Let's not get it twisted, right? He can really play. He was really good in their playoff run a year ago. I just think sometimes things go too far for both parties that it's best for a breakup. So yeah, the Pistons could just go cap space route, throw him the big offer sheet, even a max offer sheet, and say, here we go. The problem is the Suns are probably going to say, cool, we'll just match it, and then we'll figure it out later. The other thing is that would be one where if I was Troy Weaver and it's, hey, I'm gonna do an offer sheet for DeAndre Ayton, I would call James Jones and say, hey, let's not mess around with the restricted free agency process. Let's work out a sign and trade. What does it need to be? What do you need back for this guy? How do we make this work? Can we take on Dario Saric too in this deal and you can wipe that salary obligation off your books? How do we get there? And I think that would be one where that would come. Now, here's the challenge with a DeAndre Ayton sign and trade. This is where base year compensation comes into play. And this is something that happened in the Jeremy Grant sign and trade because Jeremy Grant got such a big raise on his current deal. He came in, he only counts on the Nuggets side for basically half of his contract for the salary matching. Not a huge issue because the Pistons were using cap space to bring in Grant. So they didn't have to send any salary back. I think they sent the draft rights to a player back to the Nuggets. But what happens in those situations, in the situation with Ayton, I know one of the ones I see and get asked about a lot is, could they do a sign and trade of DeAndre Ayton for Jeremy Grant? You could, and it probably works in balance salaries there enough because even if Ayton $30 million, I'm just going to use round numbers, only counts for 15. Well, the fact that Jeremy Grant would be 20 going out the other way, you can make that work. You can find that balance and reset things and go. So, and please, I'm not reporting that. That's not anything I think is going to happen. I'm just using an example. But that is, it's possible and much easier for a team like Detroit because they're using cap space, because the imbalanced salaries doesn't really matter for them as much. That makes it easier because they can absorb that big money coming in. Whereas it's just whenever you have that imbalanced stuff because of base year compensation, it can get really tricky. That's why, I won't say who it is, but I listened to an entire podcast where they spent half the show talking DeAndre Ayton sign-in trades, and I'm literally driving my daughter to school and saying illegal. And it's like, I mean, that's just how my brain works. So, but yeah, it's tough.
Real quick, Keith, do you think it's going to take some like Jeremy Grant? Do you think that's what Phoenix would demand for a sign and trade? Like for Pistons fans to be realistic about this, even for myself, because I don't know, is that what it's going to take to get DeAndre Ayton from the Suns?
Yeah, probably something like that. What I would want if I was on the Suns side, I'd want Jeremy Grant. Just give me another big switchable wing that I can have. I think teams need to be looking at the Warriors, the Clippers next year, Kawhi and PG. You can't have enough big wings against those guys. The Lakers, I know they're, if we want to spend 5 minutes making fun of the Lakers, the Celtics guys happy to do that. But it's LeBron, you still got a LeBron problem everywhere. Mikal Bridges is wonderful. Jay Crowder's pretty good. Add Jeremy Grant, now you're pretty well set right across your board there. You could even play those three guys together in some really big lineups if you wanted to. They're big switchy lineups. And that's, I think, important. What I would want to do, I would blow it out a little bit more. And I would say, well, we still need a center because teams, as much as we talk small ball, everybody still starts big. And I would say, all right, we want Kelly Olynyk back too. You eat Dario Saric's contract. He unfortunately had to have another knee surgery, which there's this next year kind of in doubt as well. You get DeAndre Ayton, Dario Saric. Maybe there's some minor balancing of assets, second round pick or something, draft rights, something like that. But we'll balance it that way, and we'll get Grant and Olynyk, and we'll continue to chase the title. You get the guy you really want. You use a little bit more of your cap space to eat another contract, and off we go. And if I was the Pistons, I would kind of look at that and say, all right, I still got DeAndre Ayton. I'm still going to have a chunk of cap space to use even after all this maneuvering. And now, I might have my starting group along with the draft pick, wherever we go in the draft. I might have my starting group pretty well set moving forward for the next, 3-4 years here. And that's really not too bad, if that's the direction they wanted to go.
Keith, I'm three names of free agency. I call this the most likely to get overpaid here. Colin Sexton, Jalen Brunson, Miles Bridges.
Keith likes Colin. I know this. I can't wait.
I do. I like Colin Sexton. I'm a big Colin Sexton guy.
If you had to predict, or maybe just your own valuation of what these guys are worth, let's just say starting salary number for next season. Sort of what would you throw out for for each guy as far as like what makes sense maybe for what the Pistons could or should offer.
Sure. I think they're all in slightly different boats. And I think so Jalen Brunson, if we start with him, if you're going to get him away from Dallas, it's going to have to probably be 25 million plus a year. And that's your challenge right? It's because Dallas probably up to that number is probably just going to say, we'll pay that. Now he's not restricted, so they don't truly have match rights, but it seems like he's going to give them first crack at it. I don't know that he's necessarily looking to leave the Mavs or anything like that. So that's your challenge, right? And at that number, that's an overpay. I can't get there. If it's an average of 20 million a year, yeah, I can probably get to that number. That probably makes sense. I'll go to Miles Bridges next. I think to get him, because he is a restricted free agent, you'd have to go full max. It's the only way you get those guys to switch teams, because you have to make it painful enough that Charlotte says, yeah, we can't do it. We can't match this deal. And I think even that might not do it, right? Because I think they're trying to, their head coach search tells me we don't want to be this team that's cute and fun and makes the play in. We got to get to the playoffs. And that says to me that they are doing what they can to retain their guys. He took such a leap forward this year as a player that, great. And let me say this before he gets Colin Sexton. 3 good targets for the Pistons. I think all 3 could make a lot of sense for the Pistons for sure.
Real quick, Keith, what's the actual numbers for the Miles Bridges if it is a max?
Yeah, I can pull that up for you real quick. It would start at about 32 million, if I got that right.
I'm out on both of those numbers. I don't know about you, Amari, while Keith is looking that up, but Jalen Brunson at the number he said, Miles Bridges at the number he's talking, I'm out on those two.
I'll just put it out there, and I've kind of said this in various ways. I don't think there's a free agent in this class that's realistic for the Pistons that I would pay what they're probably going to get if it were me calling the shots.
Hey, we got Colin Sexton coming up here. Again, I listened to Keith's podcast, and I know he's about to make a good pitch here, and I'm hoping he throws out a number where Pistons fans may like it a little bit more.
All right, so circle back on Miles Bridges, $30.5 million first-year salary. So the most of the Pistons, this is projected, of course, right, because cap hasn't settled yet. But $30.5 million first-year salary, 4 years, $136.6 million. We're looking at fourth year would be $37.8 million. So
wow,
yeah, that's a big number, right? You'd have to be really sure. Yeah, he's still going to be really good even without LaMelo, and we're going to be, we're really good with this guy, pushing things forward. All right, Colin Sexton. So, Bryce, obviously you listen to the NBA front office show, so you know this. Colin Sexton has this reputation as being a shameless gunner who all he can do is score, and that's not fully untrue, but he's not an inefficient scorer. He really shoots the ball well. He's a good finisher, shoots well from the mid-range, shoots well from 3. So that's, to me, the difference between a good stats, bad team guy who just piles up scoring stats, and shoots, 32% from 3 and 45 or 42% overall. Sexton's always been a pretty good shooter. Can also function on and off the ball. He's a decent playmaker, but he might be a little bit better off ball. And then his defense, I think, has gotten dogged a little bit over the course of the beginning of his career. But that was on some truly horrendous Cavs teams that nobody played any defense. And I think you started to see it last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt. But you started to see him make a whole new commitment to defense. And that was a big difference. So all that said, I'm obviously a big Colin Sexton fan. I think if you're going to get him away from the Cavs, because again, restricted free agent, if he's looking 18 to 20 million, you're going to probably have to go that number to get the Cavs to blink, because then the Cavs have to swallow hard and say, yeah, where are we going with that? I'm sorry, guys, the dog is losing his mind. It is, that's the number for the Cavs to say, that's too much. We can't do it. We got Darius Garland coming up the next year for an extension. We already committed to Jared Allen. We've got Lauri Markkanen. We've got this and this. We got to go a different direction for a guy who maybe would be our sixth man. We don't know that for certain. So I think that's your challenge right there is you got to go to that number. If you want to definitely get him, you go 22, 23 million. And at that point, to Amari's point to start this whole segment is, yeah, this is why these guys could get overpaid, especially if they change teams.
Yeah, it really sounds like maybe the Pistons are going to have to way overpay for any of these guys. So in the next segment, let's talk about some of the guys that you mentioned earlier that are going to get paid in that price range where the Pistons could bring in 3 or 4. And we'll do that after this short break.
All right, hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Morales, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Menares.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
Oh, we're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. Arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some Free Press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
Before we talk with Keith Smith about some more under-the-radar signings for the Detroit Pistons, I do want to read a new comment and review on Apple Podcasts from Jay Winwright. The only pod, I'm literally refreshing my page for the new drop each week. If you're looking for the Pistons surface, talk, and fluff, you won't get it here. Bryce's in-depth takes and Amari's inside information makes for a legit pairing. Give them a listen. I think this is a perfect episode to say it's not the fluff, it's not the surface talk. We go in deep, and that's why we brought Keith Smith on. We have 92 ratings on Apple, 71 on Spotify. Only one of those is a non-5-star rating, the very first rating we ever got. Omari, our listeners continue to come through with these great reviews. I love it every time we catch one.
Yeah, like we say it every week, but they tend to write full paragraphs, which we love. So keep the feedback coming. Definitely makes us feel good. And not that we need motivation to do this every week, but it feels a lot better when you know it's being received well.
Absolutely. All right, Keith, let's dive back into this. We got 10 or 15 minutes here. You mentioned a guy earlier, Mo Bamba. That's actually a name that has come around with Pistons fans quite a bit.
Yeah, I know.
Tell the listeners, let's try to hit on 5 or 6 of these guys. Numbers, what it would take. Are they a good fit for Detroit if they try to get 3 or 4 guys or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk Mo Bamba for a minute. I live in Orlando. That's the team I see in person most often. What I would say about Mo Bamba is beware the guy who looks and says, this could be my career going the wrong way, and then has a monster season. And it wasn't like a monster season for him. I'm not sold on Mo Bamba. The Magic committed to Wendell Carter Jr. over him, and he is actually, I think, is the far better player. There's a player in Mo Bamba, especially in the modern NBA, with the way he blocks shots, the way he shoots three-pointers, where he could be kind of like a modern Miles Turner in a sense, because I think he's actually a better, more physical defender than Turner is too, and a better rebounder. The problem is, until this year, it showed up about once every 5 or 6 games. And you'd see those once every 5 or 6 games. You'd be like, all right, here it is. Like we're getting ready. We're going to get a string of good games in a row. And it never happened. So that's your challenge with Mo Bamba. A number for him, I wouldn't want to give him more than $7-8 million a year. And even that's semi-questionable to me. I think his best bet is probably go take the equivalent of the taxpayer mid-level from a really good team and just develop as a backup, maybe starter. He's a guy I think maybe Phoenix could do well if they move on from Aiden, grab him using the taxpayer mid-level, bring him in there and move forward with that one. Couple other names I like for the Pistons, because I'd like to see them get a little bit more, I guess the best way to describe this is rugged defensively. I'd like to see them add a couple more defenders who are going to get up in guys' faces. One guy, I still, this one baffles me that they even let him go, but I think Bruce Brown is really good. He really became a shooter this year. Now it was on super low volume, but then that continued into the playoffs. And there's I mean, Kevin Durant still eventually got going, but he was the Nets' best player in the first round series against the Celtics. And so I'm a big Bruce Brown guy. I think he would fit in really, really well there because he's somebody who can play off the ball. He's not going to take a lot of touches away from guys. Two other guys, similar mold, and these two are restricted free agents, Caleb and Cody Martin. Caleb got more kind of high profile because he played for the Heat and jumped up. But I think he is somebody who, has improved. I think Cody is just as good as Caleb is. I almost wonder too, could you almost get them on like the Morai, package deal where it's like, hey, we want both of you. What does it take to land you both? And I think because they're restricted and on two teams that might have other plans, you could maybe get them in a slightly different way there. I'd like to see them too. I'd like to see them get somebody who can help Cade Cunningham with the ball handling and playmaking, but isn't going to run him off the ball or take the touches away from him. A guy who I think it's going to be tough because it probably falls in a little bit of the overpay, Sarah, but I really like Tyus Jones.
I was going to ask you about Tyus Jones. But
yeah. I think he could be an excellent fit there too, and I think it's going to be hard to get him out of Memphis. Quite frankly, I think Tyus Jones has a couple things. One, he's super comfortable in Memphis. They gave him the at the time the big contract to get him away from the Timberwolves. I think also Tyus Jones probably knows John Morant's play style lends to he's going to miss 20 or so games every year, and in those 20 or so games I'll show out, but I still get my chance to play big minutes. I think too, if when Ja becomes a better shooter, you can unlock dual ball handler lineups with the two of them on the floor together, so it's gonna be hard to get him away from there. But if you could, Gary Payton II, I think, is a guy you might want to consider if you're Detroit too. Not traditional point guard because he's not really a playmaker, but somebody who I think could be pretty solid for them there. Javon Carter, another guy's not going to break the bank. I think at times has been a pretty good player. Does some stuff defensively, can shoot, play off ball. With that, if the Kings mess around, which it seems like he's not happy there because they did some stuff with him as a starter, Dante DiVincenzo on the restricted market, I think is a guy who could fit. I guess I kind of have a theme here. I want some guys who can defend, do a little bit of playmaking and some shooting because I think that's where it is. And then bigs, there are countless bigs I think they could pick off and just kind of say, all right, you come in, we're going to do this. We're going to team you with Isaiah Stewart and Kelly Olynyk. We'll have our big group. I think a guy like Thomas Bryant is a guy who's worth another shot, looked good at times. Doesn't really defend at all, but you kind of to take the good offense with him. I think if for some reason things started to get a little messy, Mitchell Robinson could be a guy you could look at potentially. I just think there's too much overlap with Isaiah Stewart in terms of play style with those two guys, so I don't necessarily love that one. And then the other guy that I think about for them is Jalen Smith with the Pacers, because they're limited in what they can pay him because of the declined rookie scale option. The Pistons could come in, and that could be a good one of those, hey, we'll give you $8 million because that's basically double what the Pacers can give you. And then the second year is going to be a team option, and we'll figure it out after that and see if he can kind of pop. But those are just a bunch of guys that I think kind of jump to mind for me. And I'm sure I've missed, countless other guys. It's just, I just don't see the guy that you're committing, let me give you 4 fully guaranteed years at a big money, just because it's just not there right now. I think, Omari, you said it perfectly. When there's guys who they're likely to get are not, it's not that they're not star guys. Like, it's not going to be, commit that big money. But you know what? That's okay. It doesn't have to be this year. Like, I mean, if you're the Pistons, I think one of my kind of guiding principles would be, let's not become the Knicks and try to rush into things. The old Knicks. The new Knicks have been much more patient and have been better about that the last couple of years. But let's not be the old Knicks where it's, now we get cap space. Oh, we didn't get Zach LaVine. You know what? Let's spend a whole crap ton of money on this tier 2 guy. And I think that's where the Pistons have gotten kind of caught in the past, whether it be, really rewinding it to Villanueva and Gordon or Josh Smith. It's like, don't get yourself caught chasing because you missed out on the big target. Just stay flexible, stay true to the path. And I think that's Troy Weaver's MO, right? I think he is a guy who, kind of comes from like, hey, we're going to build this through the draft. And then when we're ready, then we'll start making our moves and adding to this group.
And that's one thing we've talked about on this pod, and me and Bryce were even texting yesterday. I think when people think about the concept of a rebuild and taking big swings and just, getting as many names as possible, you kind of look at the teams who successfully rebuild over the years. And in the end, the guys like the Grant Williams and, like the guys who aren't going to make, like $15, $20, $25 million a year are the ones who are playing 40 minutes in the playoffs. And a lot of times you maybe have two guys who are really just like your go-to scorers, and then it's just a lot of road guys, some who can get hot and step up, like Al Horford. Like, I feel like we kind of overcomplicate the concept of a rebuild. If you're the Pistons, you have Sadiq Bey, you have Cade Cunningham, and you're like, all the guys who are worthwhile are going to cost us $30 billion a year. The approach almost makes more sense to kind of look at this like, let's just get deeper. Like, let's get 2, 3, 4 guys who can really play. Take pressure off of our young guys a little bit. That almost seems to be like a more logical approach for them, even though they do have cap space. And this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs or won a playoff game in a while. So the alert to go big is there, but this is probably more of a go small offseason if you're looking at it from a what's realistic standpoint.
I like the idea of, like I said, spread it out. Go get, you build out your depth, but build out your depth in a way where your kids are still the stars. They're going to be the ones that are the centerpieces of this. And see, there it is. Bryce just came out. Center. See, I'm getting animated and getting excited. The coffee's kicking in too. But build it out. But let those guys still be the ones who shine and get the reps and get those on-ball touches. Move it forward. I think your goal would be post-trade deadline, I want to be playing competitive games next year. Not competitive in terms of scores, but meaningful games. Games that are like they have real meaning. Like we're chasing a play-in spot. I think that would be a wonderful step forward year, and you'd feel pretty good about that. Now that's what I want to see for this team is we're pushing forward, we're going up. But it doesn't. We don't need to take these giant jumps. Like that's when you get yourself in trouble. And like I said, don't go overpaying some second, third tier guys. Yeah, if you do it for a year, fine. Again, 1 year overpay is never going to hurt you. But don't lock into big money. And I don't think that's where this is going to go. And it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned Sadiq Bey because I had someone the other day say, "Is this guy actually good, or is this just big numbers on a bad team?" And my response to it was, you score 50 points in an NBA game. I don't care who you played against or what the situation was, unless it's a complete clown show where you took 50 shots to get there. Like, yeah, you're good. let's not get messed up on that. Yes, he's good. And I think he's good in a scalable way, meaning if you need him to be your third best guy, I think he can probably do that. But if he's your fourth or fifth best guy long term, that's probably even better, right? Because now we're in a spot. But and I like the young core. I really do. I want more out of Killian Hayes, right? I know Pistons fans are in the same boat there. We'll see. Sometimes point guards take 3-4 years to get there and figure it out. And he is super duper young. But man, Cade Cunningham, I want to make sure I get this in. I know I'm kind of going on a little tangent with this, but watching him play, even when the results aren't there, the process is there. Like, he just gets it. He just knows how to play. He knows what he's doing out there. And to me, that is the special part of this is this guy just knows what he's doing. And that is more than anything else, the thing I would be so excited about if I was a Pistons fan.
So I actually wrote this in the notes, Keith. You would go along the lines of the Pistons don't have to go find a number 2 option. Like, they don't have to star hunt and find that guy. Just keep building out this roster. Just keep acquiring good talent. Even if it's multiple quote unquote number 3 and 4 options, see if that works. Maybe that's good enough with Cade Cunningham, but then if it doesn't, then you can package those guys for a trade. Like, that's where you would be with this roster building, because I think I get caught up sometimes because I don't know that Sadiq's ceiling. It's crazy that people question whether he's good or not, but I don't think his ceiling is the number 2 guy. but that's okay. We don't have to go swing for the fences for that guy. Would you agree with that? Like, that's kind of what I'm hearing as you talk through this.
Yeah, not right now, not this summer. One kind of to put a bow on that, it's just not there. Like that guy's not necessarily there. Now maybe some unforeseen trade comes up, right? Then that's always a different story. And the Pistons have certainly caught me off guard with a couple of things they've done that I wasn't expecting in the last couple of years too. And that's not in a bad way by any means. I'll admit I was extremely confused when it seemed like they could only sign players that were 7 feet tall or more. Like that I didn't understand. I was like, what are we doing here? Where are we going? But I think I guess the best way to put this for me is just be patient. You don't have to do it right now. Because I get it. Everybody wants to win, and it's especially hard this time of year, right? Because you're watching the playoffs, you're watching the finals, and you want to be there, and you want to be a part of that again, and all those kind of things. But if you try and rush, you're gonna make mistakes. It's just gonna go badly. If the right opportunity is there, go. But I think you're a year away from making that big push to say, all right, now we're ready. Let's go get our guy. Let's go get, the guy to be, Cade's number 2, or maybe even he's the veteran number 1 that bumps Cade to number 2 or something like that. Like I just think that's, really important to know when you're really ready. And I trust that the Pistons front office and coaching staff knows better than anybody else how close they actually are, right? And that's the conversations you're having today. I was listening to Tommy Shepard do an interview the other day, the Wizards GM. Similar-ish boat, right? Like they're kind of coming back down as the Pistons are on the rise. But one of the things he said is you have to be really honest with your conversations about where are we at and what are our goals for the next year. And I think that's it. And I think if you sit down, if you're Troy Weaver and staff and Dwayne Casey and staff and Pistons ownership, and you say, all right, here's where we think we are. Yeah, we could go try to get Zach LaVine. We could go pay a bunch of money for Bradley Beal or do a crazy trade for some guy who's, 30 or older. And we could probably maybe even get into the play-in tournament. But then that caps our ceiling moving forward. And you don't want to be a play-in team. It's cool if it happens next season, but that's not where you want to be, right? That should be a step along the path to moving it forward. And just, stay the path, stay true to it. Keep that flexibility. That would be my key word for this offseason is flexibility. Keep it moving forward and go. With that, there's only a couple of guys. Maybe DeAndre Ayton is one, but even DeAndre Ayton, you can still get him and still keep flexibility too. And that might be the way to go if you're the Detroit Pistons, because there's going to be better free agents. There's going to be better options coming down the line, and you want to be in position to be in play for those and not sitting there looking at, man, that crappy contract we signed in 2022, that's got us completely out of the mix.
So you don't think there's anyone in this class the Pistons may look back at in a few years and they'll think, we wish we had gone bigger. It's probably just better to be conservative in this one.
Someone will pop because it always does. But I think at that point you say that's not where we were at that time on the player or as an organization, and you go. I look at free agency similar to the conversation happens much more heavily around the draft, right? Where people are like, oh man, everybody passed on Giannis. Well, yeah, no kidding. Everybody passed on Giannis. Like what are we doing here?
Don't work out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, and it's funny that he's on your roster now, but there's still Celtics fans, they might win the title here in a couple weeks. They're like, remember when we drafted Kelly Olynyk over Giannis? And it's like, what are we doing? Like, who cares anymore? Like, let it go. But yeah, I think, I don't think there's a free agent that you can look at today and point to like, yeah, they're definitely, because the other part is, are they definitely going to get them? Like, that's the other thing, right? I always remind people is, cool, you have 35 million, 36 million in cap space. There's 29 other teams that have stuff they're trying to do too. Like, let's not, this is not a 2K, where you force transactions through and, the guys, next thing you know, you're doing it. And this isn't a Lakerland where you've got a Photoshop ready for every player in the NBA in a Lakers jersey. Like, let's be reasonable. Let's think through on this. But yeah, I'm going to put my faith in the Detroit leadership group that they're going to make the right decisions moving forward, even if it's not holy crap, look at this, amazing thing. Because they always say this: who cares about winning a press conference? Right? You could stand up there a month from now and, show off a whole bunch of dudes in new Pistons jerseys and get everybody all fired up, all that. And then you come out and you're 10-20 after 30 games. And all you're going to do is be like, what did we do? The press conferences don't matter. Win games, stay the path, see it through.
I love it. I love the path. I love the idea. Great episode, Keith. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of the great insights into all of this stuff. Before we let you go, just let the people know where they can find you, your podcast, everything you do on Twitter, must follow, must listen, all of that stuff, and Spot Track, where I go through all of my contract stuff. Anytime somebody asks me a question, let everybody know where they can find that stuff.
Yeah, the podcast and YouTube show is NBA Front Office Show. It's me and Trevor Lane. It's a Celtics and Lakers guy paired up on there. We have a lot of fun with that, but I think we try to be a little more reasonable. If things keep going a certain way, I'm only a couple weeks away from getting real belligerent on there. Maybe it might be the end of the show, but it's no, we have a lot of fun. If you like this kind of stuff, this is what we do every day is go deep into this, and we're getting ready to crank up all of our off-season free agency stuff. We do a lot of stuff by players, teams, all that stuff. We're really excited to get that going. Spot Track, thanks for shouting them out. It's I say with full admission of bias, it's the most timely, most accurate, best publicly available NBA salary information that you can find. It's all there. Everything you want to know is there with that. We also have, if you want to do what we kind of did here and play GM, we have a manage roster tool where you can do everything that the GMs can do and really manage your roster through on that. And then as far as I go, right now, I'm going to be honest, it's pretty Celtics heavy on my timeline, but that's only going to last for another few weeks, and then we'll be really fully off season focused. But at Keith Smith NBA, follow, mute for a couple more weeks, and then you can unmute, and then we'll be in the off-season league-wide coverage.
Keith, we want all of your Boston takes over the next couple of weeks, and there should be a fun finals as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was probably one of our most informative episodes as far as just raw NBA info. So we truly do appreciate that. So big thanks to Keith Smith for joining us today. Also, thanks to our editor, Kerry Jr. II, our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, and our other executive producer, Kirkland Crawford. And of course, shout out to Wes Davenport, who puts the outlines together, keeps us in line. After our cheat and sham last week, we'll try to find another chance to get him back on here soon. So take care, everyone. We'll see you all next week.